The following program contains descriptions of sexual violence.
This is the house that Julian was brought up in. We used to get pheasants and rabbits and all sorts of things, you know. Yes, it was lovely. Just the job for somebody who was nature crazy.
Can you show us his bedroom? Which one is it?
It would have been over there. What I've got in there are a lot of his things. And I've got all his big collection of records and tapes and things. It was punk. It was wonderful.
You like it?
I do. Yes. I did at the time and I still do.
Does it remind you of him when you play them?
I guess it does, yes. What do you want me to do? Start from the top?
Yes, please. Could you tell me what it is you're reading?
My statement to the court, I think. Julian was my only son, my only child. He was a young man with all his life in front of him. This was a particularly vindictive murder, perpetrated entirely for her personal gain. To think that my son should be killed in this calculated and cruel way torments me. The grief, the pain, and the torment will not go away. The wounds are still open. I miss him so much. I'm devastated. It was a man and a woman, police officers, that turned up. They told me he was dead. Days passed and I couldn't tell you what I did. The police, they told me, well, maybe, you know, he did commit suicide. I wasn't going to have that. I said to them, look, you know, this really cannot be true.
How could you know that?
Gut feeling.
You better stop the things you do. Because you're
The story of Dina is very complicated, very confusing. People just think you're making it up, because if you wrote this as a book, it would sound too far-fetched. In 1994, on the 4th of July, I went to Dina's house in Douglas Close in Yapton. So I went to the house to take a witness statement from Dina about the death of her husband, Julian Webb. A post-mortem was carried out when Julian's body had been brought to the hospital. And it established he had died through taking an overdose of drugs. How they had been administered was what we were trying to establish.
What were your first impressions of her?
Oh, I'd say she was very nice, and she was willing to talk. Her account was that he had committed suicide by taking an overdose. And there was a bottle of spirits and drugs had been found. She said he was depressed, and he'd been depressed for some time.
Did that seem believable to you?
Yeah, I've got to be absolutely honest. We didn't disbelieve it. But she didn't seem to be the grieving widow. Or how old you would expect somebody to be 4 days after the person that they presumably loved the most in the world had died. She said, not very long before she made the phone call to the paramedics, he was still alive and was snoring. Paramedics turned up very quickly, 7 or 8 minutes from the initial call. But when they moved him off of the bed onto the floor, rigor mortis had set in. That would indicate that he had been dead for several hours. I realised there were a number of inconsistencies in Dina's statement. It wasn't an open and shut case of somebody committing suicide. It needed a lot more investigation. But it was quite difficult, to be honest with you, because the only witness to this was Dina.
I was basically Julian's snotty-nosed little cousin that used to, come down and annoy him. He was obviously older. He was into his bodybuilding. He was quite a fit bloke. He used to drive a nice red Triumph Stag, which I was never allowed anywhere near. It was quite a summer's day. My mum had told me to come and meet Dina. I've kind of almost felt a little bit sorry for her, kind of it's a girlfriend being grilled kind of thing.
I mean, I just thought she was a fairly ordinary person. She was at the Woolwich Building Society. He was up in the offices of the West Sussex Gazette, which was just down the road a wee bit. And I think they used to meet at lunchtime in the pub across the road.
He was quite a shy person, so I don't think he was one to go chatting up girls. Julian lived at home until, he'd met Dina.
She was divorced. She had her little boy, Darren, from her previous marriage. He was a lovely little child. He might have been about 3 at that time, but I found Dina to be absolutely humourless. And, some of the things she said were so far-fetched, they could not be true.
My auntie, Rosie, she took an instant dislike to Dina. And I wondered whether it's just, I don't know, an overprotective mum kind of just not being keen on her. Within just less than a year, they were engaged.
I said, for God's sake, Julian, give it more time. What's the rush? It was probably the fact that his friends were all married or getting married. And of course, I think she saw him as someone she could manipulate. And I'm sure she was very charming, but, that's all part of the game, isn't it?
They registry office. It wasn't a big wedding. And then they went on a honeymoon to Florida. He loved it. Julian absolutely loved it. He loved his fishing. He was a really good fisherman.
Good catch.
And that's when she suggested that why don't they move there?
He didn't tell me he was thinking of emigrating. I expect he didn't, because he probably would have thought I would have said, don't.
Dina suggested running, a fishing charter business, taking tourists out on fishing boats. That's a dream job for Julian.
Did it seem like Julian and Dina were in love?
Whatever love is, to quote Prince Charles. I suppose the answer to that is no. No real affection shown, but perhaps there wouldn't be in front of me, who knows?
At this point for you, no alarm bells?
No, not for me. I just thought, he's married, he's in love. Start of a new life. But then, a few months after the wedding, she was diagnosed with cancer.
And I thought, oh, well, if she hasn't got long to live, we'll be rid of her soon. I laugh, but it's a way of surviving. Within a matter of months after she got cancer, she was saying that her ex-husband, Lee, was about and he was beating her up and he was threatening and they had to keep on the move to avoid him. I kept trying to contact Julian and I couldn't.
So they, instead of living in their home...
Yes.
...had spent time on the run?
Yes. It would have been, several weeks, which is why I was getting worried. I thought her ex-husband was, one of these big bruiser types. And when Julian told me she'd got a panic button that the police had installed, I thought if he turned up and found Julian there, he'd beat him up.
Dina accused Lee Wyatt of several assaults. He had used a police truncheon to indecently assault her. She'd had cigarettes stubbed out on her. They were very serious allegations.
Lee was hugely dangerous. So yeah, there was a lot of concern for Julian's safety, but also for Dina's.
Officers investigating Dina's allegations have been looking for Lee for over a year without any trace of him. And now, with the death of Julian Webb, we needed to find him, and we needed to find him fast.
Dina and I both went to the same school. We worked together at the Halifax Bank in the 80s. She was very clever, a very good cashier. She'd always try and wangle it that we got the same lunch break. So we'd go round the shops and just do, I'd say, girl stuff, really. So we had a laugh together. She genuinely was a nice person. First time I met Lee, I remember him vividly with sort of blonde hair, just like a nice looking guy. You couldn't really not like him. But all of a sudden, I started to get phone calls from Dina. Lee's done this, Lee's done that. And they weren't pleasant things. Lee had raped her. It's awful, it's beyond all comprehension. It was like this guy had turned into a monster.
As part of the investigation into the Julian Webb death, one of the things we wanted to do was to establish where Lee Wyatt was. And he was out as wanted. So if he got stopped in the street, he would be arrested. But he was nowhere to be found. Dina had also received death threats from Lee Wyatt.
Hello?
Is that Dina?
Yeah, is that Lee?
Ah, you remember? Roses are red, violence is black. You need our shafting as a payback.
And when you actually hear these threatening phone calls, it sends a chill down your spine. We had to find him.
Are you conscious of how the story sounds?
I am, because it sounds mental. People will be looking at that, oh, is he telling the truth? Is this what really happened? Oh, look, he coughed there, or his eyes have moved over. Everyone is an armchair detective, and they all think they know. Hey, that's human life. We all do it. So just accept it for what it is, the unbelievable, and its truth. This is what happened. I've never been on a blind date before in my life. There was butterflies. So eventually we got to the theatre. It's about a murder scene, sort of whodunit. Dina, she probably revelled in it. The fact that, oh yeah, this is good, right up my street. We kissed that night. It's hard to say, but all I will say is that there was a stage where it was all genuine. I loved Dina. Yeah.
My 21st birthday party, I went dressed as a bumblebee, and he and Dina made themselves teddy bear outfits. She was an attractive, blonde young lady with a seemingly very bubbly personality. I mean, there was nothing there that raised my suspicions. My cousin was just getting into a serious relationship and he was going to settle down.
So we both dressed up as teddy bears, sort of holding hands, walking into there. Well, 10 minutes into the dance floor and dancing, wow. I wish I'd taken a bit more underarm perspirant or aftershave, because it was a bit hot in there. Real happy memories were buying a house. And she would help me out doing the painting. We were doing things together. She was into soft toys, making soft toys. And everyone always used to remark on it. And I thought, with my sales background, I can retail them. In the beginning, we were quite successful. We went on holidays together. Dina knew that I'd always wanted kids. When my son was born, Darren, that was the happiest point in my life. Yeah. So, for a couple of years, my life was pretty okay. I was doing all right.
Did he seem besotted?
In retrospect, yes. And I think, to be honest, to carry on, to follow the path that he followed, then he had to have been completely besotted.
Anyway, one of these soft toys was a little leprechaun about so big. I was selling them at £25 a time. One of the directors that owned the business premises where we were renting out just came up to me and he said, "I want 25,000. We shook hands. Next minute, a letter turns up from the BBC that they wanted to do a cartoon series of Shaun the Leprechaun, and it was worth 250,000. Wow! Then Dina told me someone in Walt Disney saw what we had to offer and they want to buy Shaun the Leprechaun, and the sum is between 40 and 50 million pounds. There was some, what? Dina would be on the phone talking with Hilary, the solicitor. To be honest, she was the person that was in the office and in charge of the phone. So I just let her carry on that way.
It's interesting that he didn't share that news with you or anyone else.
I get the feeling, or I got the feeling subsequently, that once she started spinning that story, the disappearance was quite quick after that.
Dina sat me down and she said, "Our lives are in danger." She said that the mafia want the money from Walt Disney. And I said, "What mafia? Who is this?" Now I'm thinking the mafia from the States, but no, it was the Irish mafia, the Irish IRA, another form of criminal underworld gang. The last thing they want is an Englishman making money out of their own folklore item. And what they're going to do is kill Dina and my son if they don't get the money. And she said, "You've got to either leave the country or go somewhere and try and set a life up for us wherever you're going." And I trusted her. Why would I not? I was terrified in what was going to happen, not necessarily to me, but to Darren.
When you left, was that the last time that you saw Darren?
Yeah.
By that point, he is completely controlled by Dina. Nobody had had any contact with him whatsoever. We didn't know where he was. No phone calls, no letters, zero communication. He was just a ghost. Just a ghost.
At that point, I was in Cornwall. So many things had already gone on. My mind was just in circles everywhere. Because she said you can never ring the house phone because it's being tapped. I had a list of about half a dozen phone boxes. She had to give me a day, a date, and a specific time. I'd be sitting in the phone box waiting for her to ring me. Ring, ring, pick it up. And she kept on saying, "Don't give up on us now. You've got to keep this whole thing going for the lives of Darren and ourselves so we can be together." I mean, she said that more than a dozen times, all the time. I remember that on one occasion she was literally crying. I was crying as well, because of the fact that I haven't seen my son for a long time. And the fact, am I ever going to see him? I just believed everything that she was telling me was the truth. At some stage, she said that there were people watching the house, a protection squad looking after Dina and my son. I was told This guy that was part of the team that was protecting us was called Julian Webb. Dina said to me that I was going to take his name. I was going to become Julian Webb. I would be taking on the whole identity. And he would just be entering back into the protection squad, protecting others. And I'm thinking, I'll go along with it. To get a new ID in the name of Julian Webb.
Little group of sapparella. This is the horn of plenty and it's very tasty, I gather, sort of put into stews. But in France they also call it the trumpet of death. That was a gap, I must have missed one. If I'm out on the nature reserves and so on, I've always got my photographic gear. There's all sorts of things that I see. You just think, I wish Julian could have seen that. And of course, we both of us had this great love of wildlife.
What else makes you remember him?
I suppose absolutely everything, really. You know, it's one of those things you can come round a corner and see something straight through the heart.
Julian wouldn't have committed suicide ever. He wasn't that person, and certainly even if he was massively, massively depressed, which he wasn't because everything was going right, it doesn't make any sense.
I mean, I know you can never completely know another person, but in the same way that I could never do it, I'm quite sure he could never do it either.
After Julian's death, we went down to Hampshire, where Julian Webb was originally from. We took statements from friends and family. Not one person I spoke to said that they believed he would take his own life through depression. If Julian had committed suicide, he would have left a note or been telling people he was considering committing suicide. He hadn't done that. That's when it started becoming really concerning. This is totally out of character for him. So if it wasn't suicide, could it have been an accidental overdose, or had somebody given him those drugs? One of the neighbours, he said that leading up to Julian's death, Dina and Julian had had several arguments about money, and he'd heard these.
Something happened. I remember he said, I believe marriage is for life no matter how difficult it is. He was not his happy, ebullient, general self.
Did you ever get to find out?
No, I didn't. Because it was within a matter of months he was dead.
It was early hours of the morning. I drove up to Sussex. I want to protect my son and I'm not there. How the hell do I do this? How long is this going to keep on going on for? I want answers because there's something not quite right that's going on here. Is Dina lying to me? Would I see my son? I knocked on the door. It was strange because she was behaving weirdly towards me. What are you doing here? You're going to ruin everything. And I think I said, ruin what? What's going on? But she was not telling me nothing. So I guess that's because there was someone else in the property. I believed that there was a protection officer called Julian who was looking after Darren and Dina. Well, there was no sign of Julian. And then she said, we'll have to see one another tomorrow, or I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Did you know he was upstairs in bed at that point?
No. I had no idea. I didn't know what was happening.
I want to ask you about the last days of Julian's life.
Yes.
It began with him not being very well, is that right?
I'd been down to the New Forest and I'd seen these massive carp in the river at Bewley. And they'd come up with the big pink mouths, open mouths, waiting for you to drop something in them and so on. And I thought he'd like to know about that. And I think I phoned him when I got home. And she said he was unwell and he'd got a tummy upset or something and he was in bed.
I get a phone call, and it's Dina. She said, oh, Mandy, Julian's not well. She said, oh, look, I went up and he was really, really boiling hot. So she said, so I gave him paracetamol, but then when I went up again, he was like freezing cold. I'm like, maybe you should phone an ambulance or something. And then she went, oh, must go because, yeah, Dad's coming now. And then that was it. Nothing.
It was his birthday, so I phoned again, and she said he was very ill and he was in bed and he was asleep. She was very chatty then, more chatty than I've ever heard her. And I said, would you go and wake him up and ask him to speak to me, please? And she made all sorts of excuses. I said, look, he's still ill. Phone the doctor. Julian wouldn't want the doctor. I said, yes, he would want the doctor. Phone the doctor. And in the middle of that conversation, she said, she said, he's being very sick. And put the phone down. I think he was trying to get down to the phone to speak to me, because he would have known it was me. I did think of going round there. I knew there was something wrong. At the funeral, I was sort of living in a zombie limbo, because it's almost unreal. I think I'm still in a state of limbo, really.
It was just horrendous. Your cousin is dead.
In my heart, I knew she had done this. I've never met anyone who could tell so many lies.
Is Dina a killer? Is she a, you know, I found it really, really hard. It was kind of very, very, very surreal, very strange, but Rosie was absolutely adamant, absolutely adamant. Unless someone's found with a knife in their hand and standing over the body, you don't think someone would do that. Julian didn't have a bad bone in his body. Why would his wife kill him?
I do remember my partner went over and spoke to Dina's family, saying, we don't want any more contact with you. Her father said to him, just you watch what you're saying, in sort of desperation, sort of bullying sort of terms. It did strike me as odd.
How soon after Julian's death did you set your mind to finding out what happened and getting justice?
Half an hour. Very soon, you know, because I knew she had done this. I've always been someone who likes to work through things. I am a bit bizarre, I understand that, but it was the thrill of the chase, and it was another salvation. I mean, she looks innocent, doesn't she? It was a question, really, of finding evidence. I found a letter telling him he'd got a job in America. Dear Julian, I have pleasure in offering you the position as travel representative with Tibbs. Well, she's made it up, hasn't she? You know what they say about scams, poor grammar and bad spelling. This has it all. I mean, I didn't set out to do a detective's job. I didn't know whether the police knew it or not, but I was making sure that they did know it.
During the investigation, we were able to confirm Dina went to her next door neighbours to use a word processor to write the letter. The neighbours said that, well, actually Dina wrote it and here's the copy that I took of it.
I just kept finding these things. She spins these wild yarns. I mean, she did claim she had cancer, and that was not true. She was seeking for sort of sympathy. It was all part of her plot.
Everybody starts telling us stories about Dina's health, about how she had breast cancer, womb cancer, liver failure, how she was going to have one foot amputated because of her diabetes. And when you actually meet her, there's absolutely nothing wrong with her.
So much stuff came out about what she'd done. The morning after Julian died, Dina was on the steps at Julian's work at 8:30 a.m. saying that she wants to know about the death in will service. You know, she turned up a matter of hours after Julian had died to ask where her money was. That's incredible.
Dina was obviously a liar. The extent of her lies was so extreme, I think she started to believe them herself. She had created a world of fabricated stories. The amount of different versions that she had given to people about Julian's death was staggering. saying that he had seasickness, sunstroke, he'd been depressed, and he'd taken to drinking alcohol. Well, most of those we could show weren't true. The post-mortem established he had no alcohol in his blood or in his urine. There would have been some traces of alcohol, there was none. It rang alarm bells. You have to put all this together to try and establish whether she had murdered Julian. This is definitely no accident. We made discovery after discovery. The biggest bombshell of them all was that she had never divorced Lee Wyatt. We were all truly shocked.
She was still married to Lee Wyatt. And, of course, Julian didn't know that, and neither did we.
We had suspicions around Dina, but we had to consider whether Lee was involved in the death of Julian Webb, or whether they had done it together. Or was Lee, in fact, another victim? It's very difficult for somebody to disappear completely for that length of time. We had serious concerns that he may well be dead. Despite the circumstantial evidence pointing to Dina having a hand in Julian's death, there was no smoking gun. The Crown Prosecution Service said, you don't have enough evidence to charge her with murder. I can't describe the frustration because we felt we were letting Julian down.
It was interesting because I think they thought it was a sort of, you know, just a small case. And loads of people turned up. And obviously the coroner thought there's something up here.
We know that in Julian's body there was aspirin and dithiopine, which the coroner confirmed were found in fatal doses. But the coroner couldn't say how the drugs had got there. There was no evidence that Julian had committed suicide, but also there wasn't sufficient evidence of foul play.
The coroner came back and said, well, there wasn't a completely satisfactory explanation for his death, and therefore he was recording it as an open verdict. That proved that he hadn't committed suicide.
It meant that murder was still an option.
The case wasn't closed?
The case wasn't closed, no.
It is incredibly disappointing, the fact that we weren't able to give justice to the victim and the victim's family. And I felt that because we hadn't got Dina behind bars, something else was going to happen. I come into work in the morning and I'm told by one of the DSs a man is stopped by the police for benefit fraud and is in custody. He had been using the name of Colin Mitchell, which was a false name. So I walked downstairs, looked in, and I immediately recognised him. We have Lee Wyatt in custody.
I always remember my mother said, Lee, you can never tell them the complete truth because no one will believe it. They'll think you're mad. Based on what I now know, I do believe that she tried to kill me on a couple of occasions. I was victim number one, and no one was going to believe victim number one.
If you have been affected by any of the issues raised in this programme, help is available online at sky.com/viewer support. This programme contains depictions of violence. Please be aware that this programme also contains themes of suicide.
When I was on the run, Dina was psyching me up by saying, the mafia only want to kill us if you're alive. She was saying, if you committed suicide or pretend suicide, can we take photos?
You would fake committing suicide,
Yeah.
and then no one would be after you anymore.
There'll be a new identity for me to pick up because Lee Wyatt has killed himself. There's a special hangman's noose. You put it over your shoulders and arms, and you've got to be a very good actor to sort of make the disguise.
Did you ever feel like she was suggesting you should actually commit suicide?
Yeah, on quite a few occasions. I was her biggest problem because I'm still alive and I can fill in all the gaps.
You better stop the things you do. Because you.
I remember I was sitting in my office and someone called Sean McDonald, who was a DC that I'd never met, walked in and he said, I've done some profiling of you and you worked on a lot of murders. And I said, I have. He said, I think you're pretty good at murder. I said, well, thank you. And he started talking about someone called Julian Webb. A few years earlier, Julian had unexpectedly died.
His wife Dina straight away said that he committed suicide, but everybody took the view that this was a suspicious death. Sean and a lot of the officers felt that there was far more to this, and Sean gave me the files in the hope that I could further that view. Dina told the paramedics that Julian had died literally 15 minutes before the ambulance arrived, and yet when they went to move the body had rigor mortis. And that rang alarm bells because rigor mortis takes far longer than 15 minutes to set in. He died long before she told us that he died.
And then we got the A&E doctor who thought Dina was faking her grief. Really, really unusual. Finally, I have never in my life heard of anybody claiming for a partner's money the day after an unexpected death. It was quite obvious there was more to this case than met the eye. And now Dina's first husband, Lee White, had reappeared.
Lee had been missing for about 4 years, and he was accused of seriously assaulting Dina, and his disappearance appeared to be linked to that. He was arrested for benefit fraud using an alias of Colin Mitchell. There were quite a few things to talk to him about, and we were hoping that some light on what happened to Julian would be shed in the interview.
I've been living alone for 4 years on the run. Dina was living with Julian, and there I was, moving from place to place and sometimes living rough, really rough, and I was desperate and broken. I didn't tell anyone about the mafia because they'd think I'd mad. So that's the sort of thing you have to keep quiet. Told no one nothing. And for all those years, I hadn't seen my son, Darren, because Dina told me it wasn't safe. I'd lost all perspective on truth and what was lies. I got the impression she's trying to make me mad. I was probably bordering on that non-sanity thing simply because what I've gone through. I made these dozens of little notes. I would write things like, is Dina lying to me? And then another one saying, has all this story about Disney been a lie? Every time I spoke to her, I would say, how long is this going to keep on going on for? What's happening? I want answers. And that's when she said, Julian is dead. And I said, well, how is that? Why is that? And then she put the phone down on me. So obviously I was asking too many questions. Took a deep breath and I thought, so I'm not going to be a protection squad taking over the identity of Julian Webb. I tried to ring her again after that, but she wasn't picking up.
Did you think for even a moment that she might have killed him?
No. No, I didn't. I didn't think it was in her. A week later, she contacted me, and then that's when she strung up the thing about the States. You've got to get yourself over there with a passport. And she said, you'll see Darren. You'll see him in the hotel. She said we were going to be starting a new life together as a family unit. I said, at last. But she said it wasn't safe to travel together. So she said, I'll meet you over there. That's when the brain started ticking over, thinking, there's something not quite right here. But I need to try and make a life, and I need to try and get my son back. So I went anyway. She came into the hotel room, and I'm thinking now we can have an embrace together. And straight away she would come out with, do you have any money? And I said, I've got no money. She wasn't happy with that at all. And I thought, this isn't right. And she said, I'll go back and I'll get Darren now. And I thought, what the hell is going on? I need to follow her when she leaves and see if she's telling the truth. I ducked out the rear entrance, climbed over a fence, and I saw her heading towards a young man. They kissed. And that's when it suddenly hit me like a ton of bricks. She's carrying on like I never existed. I feel sick. And I realised the whole thing was a sham. All these years, Lee, you've been manipulated and used. And everything has been a lie. I was thinking, I need to see the parents. I need to ask them questions. I've got no money. So I signed on at the job centre.
You signed on as?
As Colin Mitchell. And then I had a letter saying, can you come into the office? We believe there's something not quite right. And I said, right, game is up.
He had been sleeping rough, sleeping in bus shelters. He looked a bit dishevelled, should we say. But, you know, he's not got tattoos on his face or anything like that. He was just a very ordinary sort of looking bloke.
We'd suddenly got Lee Wyatt. I couldn't believe it. We knew that Lee and Dina were still married legally when Dina married Julian. And we knew Lee was at the house in Yapton about the time that Julian died.
Dina accused Lee of stealing money, of breaking into her house, of assault. And we had this awful allegation of sexual assault against him.
These are serious allegations. He would easily be facing 5 years or more in prison.
As soon as the door shut, I was frightened. I was shaking. I thought, well, what story do I tell? I did what I did because I thought I needed to save the lives of my son and Dina, but whether or not they would believe me, I don't know.
And I said, we're going to go through this from start to finish. So let's start at the beginning and take me through it.
Yeah. 86, and that was probably the very start of it all. We had the first year together, which were quite wonderful, as in we were going places. And then Dina was pregnant. She said, this isn't right, this is uncomfortable. And the medical staff declared that the baby was dead.
How many weeks pregnant was she?
Oh, about 36 weeks. So it's like, you know, full term. Dina had to go through the motions of birth. Such was the exhaustion of doing it, Dina's heart stopped. I heard what we call the death throttle. The sister then ran out to get the machine to give her a shock. And I was shouting, don't do this to me. We've got a life together. We whacked her in the heart. And then there was a big deep breath that came from her. The sister rushed in and said, "She's alive, she's all right." The baby came out, and I remember saying, "It is our child, our baby, just to say goodbye to it." The name was Louise Amanda Wyatt, and that would be my initials. So it was a part of me dying with her. Yeah. I wanted to pick up the baby, and she wouldn't allow it. She was just saying, "Don't look at it. Don't touch it." I never once touched the baby, and nor did she. And I didn't touch Louise because I didn't want to upset Dina.
Did something change that day?
Yeah. That to me was a moment where Dina died. And I honestly to God think Dina came back as truly another person. Everyone gave Dina the sympathies, and quite rightly so, but she just carried on as normal, as if nothing had happened. And within weeks, she insisted she had to get pregnant again. So we did that, and Darren was obviously on his way. Darren, he was £6'7" when he was born, but it took 5 days for him before he could come out because he became a blue baby. So he got put into an oxygen box tank, and I'm thinking, I can't believe this is happening again. From that point onwards, I became fearful that I was going to lose him too.
I think what Lee went through made him feel vulnerable.
Do you think that Darren was used as a way of controlling Lee?
Oh, yeah. In that sort of situation. It's currency.
How soon after Darren was born did Dina tell you about the mafia?
It's got to be within weeks. He was a little baby. I believed that the Irish mafia wanted to kill all of us. This was hitmen, and Dina said there was a price on my head, £100,000. They wanted all the money from the cuddly toy business, from the rights to Shaun the Leprechaun.
But you must have said to her, "What do you mean, the mafia?" Like, what was your reaction?
Yeah. Well, I had heard of stories like the Irish Mafia before. When I heard Irish Mafia, I just assumed in the IRA. At the time, there was a war of the IRA against people on the mainland. And the day we got married, the Grand Hotel in Brighton got bombed. And I just thought, this is a dangerous organisation. I was frightened.
It's quite hard to imagine. There are numerous people out there trying to kill your newborn baby,
Yep.
your wife, yourself.
Yep. And you're always looking at someone as, well, are they the enemy or are they a good person? Sounds crazy, But every time it came out of the house, I would go through the standard security check, looking under the cars for bombs. I kept track of the number plates in the back of the rearview mirror. I would write it down on a little notepad to see if I had the same number plate following me. Every time we went out. I did fear for our lives every hour of every day.
It's such a crazy story. It's extremely hard to believe, but you validate a lot of what he said happened.
Yeah. How do you manage to isolate somebody that effectively, and where does the drive come from to want to do that to another human being? But by that point, he is completely controlled by Dina. And we had no idea. Dina struck me as being a very well-balanced, perfectly normal human being. Dina was contacting my Auntie Jean with phone calls. Very, very odd visit without Lee. And there was the constant blaming of Lee being the one that didn't want anything to do with his mother or the family, and she was the innocent one doing her best to communicate. When you're only given one side of the information, what do you believe? There was no reason not to believe her at all.
Dina had said that my mother and family had been infiltrated by the mafia, and that's why contact ceased from me. And I believed her. Within 2 years, I'd lost my grandfather, my father, and then I had the stillborn of Louise. And together with her bringing up these stories of all the mafia, that was just juggling about in my brain. Perhaps I was having a mental breakdown, not just that particular minute, that week, but just gradually building up.
Lee I saw as being a strong, well-adjusted person. Successful, knew his own mind, knew what he wanted out of life, and he absolutely got torn apart by somebody's manipulation.
I absolutely couldn't believe the story I was hearing. You think this can't have happened.
You have to unravel all the stories that are there, and they're so intertwined and so difficult to unravel.
I thought, well, are they against me or are they with me? I had a lot to tell them. I'm the victim of her lies.
Nobody had had any contact with Lee whatsoever. He was just a ghost. Just a ghost. Lee was an only child, and he was very, very dear to his parents. You know, I was angry at the time. And in my naivety, I just thought, I'm going to go and find Lee and have a go. And I'm going to find out why he's not talking to his mother. I drove down a very long lane to get to their house. And nobody was more surprised than Dina when she opened that door and I was stood there. And she told me Lee was away and he wouldn't be back. So I might as well go.
Away where?
Didn't elaborate on that at all.
Dina told me, just hide. I was just huddled up in the corner so that I wouldn't be acknowledging myself to him.
Why did you accept what Dina said, that Lee wasn't there? Did you not feel like you wanted to have a look around inside? And
That's... I should have done. But at that point, we had no reason to disbelieve that wasn't the case. You know, we weren't privy to what was effectively the psychological warfare that was going on aimed at Lee. Lee was part of a journey for Dina. I think she was learning how to control people to the extent that she controlled Lee. And then what she did post that became the murderess.
By then, Dina didn't really talk about Lee. I guess I didn't really ask. I knew that Lee had assaulted her, but I didn't know anything else. Lee was definitely out of the picture. And all of a sudden, she's talking about someone called Julian. Suddenly, she was Julian's partner. I think this one day, I remember being in the front room. I look out the window, and it's Dina, and this person walking down. Hello, this is Julian. Oh, hello, pleased to meet you. It kind of didn't make sense, but it wasn't like, she didn't say, oh, I'm having an affair, which should, you know, that's what would be classed at in theory. And it was like, suddenly they were married. I've never seen two people that would be so different. But it was very much, to me, that she was in charge.
Her father said, Dina's just married. Some chap. And I said, what do you mean married? Well, married? She can't marry. Said, I'm married. There's no divorce. She'd told her parents that we were in the proceeds of divorcing one another. But it wasn't true. She married him bigously. She actually put on the marriage certificate, spinster. At the time, I thought it was just part of this plan to protect us. A week before Dina married Julian, she said to me, you have to be on the run without us. And she told me I couldn't stay as Lee Wyatt. I had to have another identity. It felt like I was an undercover operative. So I'd read a couple of books. There was the Day of the Jackal, I think it was. This guy was going through the French countryside, killing all manner of people, taking cars and money. So I pulled out a map of the UK and I quite literally hovered my arm and a finger and a pencil around this. I spun myself in a circle to make myself giddy, and the first bit I hit was Newquay. Wasn't quite on Newquay, it was near Newquay.
In those days, the amusement arcades were in their heyday. So it would be pushers and things like that. And then the cranes, which was the grabbers. You pick it up and win every time.
Simple.
No. What we used to do is take the weight of the toy, hold it in there, and then just ease it off so that basically the grab would do that. One day, a person walked through the front door, long hair and a beard, asked if there's any employment available. I offered him a job fixing machines. I asked him his name, he said he was Colin. Colin Mitchell.
Hi, I'm Colin Mitchell.
So who was Colin Mitchell?
Well, he's someone that worked in the hotel trade, and I probably used to see him every day.
So you knew him?
So I knew him, yeah.
And you stole his name?
And I used his name, managed to get a passport, in the name of Colin John Mitchell.
How did you do that?
I just applied for it. It's funny because there was a film on called The Fugitive, and I saw that at the cinema, and I thought, God, is that me? I'm not going to be jumping off of rivers and helicopters and stuff like that, but that's how I felt.
And I say, Colin, can you do this? Basically, you wouldn't answer to Colin. Now I know why, yes. Yeah, because he wasn't called Colin.
I was waiting for the threat of the mafia to be gone. Leaving your son behind, obviously, that was quite horrific. So my trust was in Julian and his mates, the protection squad, to look after them too. And Dina always said, yeah, they're doing their jobs. They're looking after us. They're arresting the hitmen, according to her. Well, it turns out Julian became a stepfather sort of thing as a substitute dad. He probably behaved quite well to him. But I'm not to know that because no one ever told me anything.
Lee hasn't seen his son for years because of Dina.
For a parent to leave their child, this is very extreme action. This is not normal behaviour.
I realised what we were looking at was a really controlling relationship. Coercion starts with very small control, like, I'll answer the phone, I'll open the door. A month later, it's, I'll access our joint bank account. And the scary nature of coercion is that often the person being controlled doesn't realise it. But it was a complex story, and we had this awful allegation of sexual assault against Lee that we had to put to him.
Roses are red, violence is black, you need our shafting as a payback.
It's not good. My hands were shaking, my feet were shaking, and I admit to them that I did make that call. She said, you have to make a phone call where you're slagging me off. Then I questioned, and then she said, don't give up on Darren. I said, I'm not giving up on Darren, but you are. You're asking all these questions, and this is this twist that she does. Then I read the sexual assault statement, which she signed. She set me up with a crime I haven't committed. I knew this was serious. And that's when it all came to me. I asked, what date did she say this happened? He gave me the date. It's impossible. I was in Cornwall working on that day, and the detectives looked at each other and they left the room.
Did you attack or abuse Dina?
Not then, and in no other times, whatever. So that wasn't me. That was her mental state. She's just on another level.
I called his old boss, and Lee's alibi checked out. He was 200 miles away when the incidents that she's saying were happening in Yapton when he was working in Cornwall.
Worryingly, she got Lee Wyatt to incriminate himself in numerous offences that he hadn't committed, purely because she coerced him into doing it.
I loved her that much that I would have done anything for her. Love does make you do crazy things.
This had all been fabricated by Dina. He was never charged with any offences.
Full credit of Mark's to them. Because they believed in an innocent man.
I'd never heard of a case as extreme as Lee Wyatt. It was mind-numbing what she did to him. By the end of the interview, I don't think any of us thought that he was in any way connected to the death of Julian Webb. The way Dina set up Lee Wyatt took a lot of intelligence, took a lot of thought, a lot of planning, premeditation. But we couldn't charge Dina with anything, because at that time, coercive control wasn't a crime. She got away with it, and the damage caused was horrendous.
Of course, I tried to get custody, but the family court judge took her word rather than mine. What she's done isn't against the law, and the police would not help. It's like a civil matter rather than a law enforcement thing. I think Darren has always lived with his grandmother, Dina's mother, Margaret. I got the impression he's been taught the father is the devil. So he's been brainwashed. Of course he has. I wanted a life together with my son. But I hadn't seen Darren for 3 or 4 years. When I left, all I could say is, "Oh, Daddy will see you again soon." But I never saw him after that. I remember sending things for his birthday. It was all sent back to me. I've never known what he's done in his life, how he got on at school. Darren is the greatest loss of my life.
I was frustrated that we hadn't got a charge. Dina completely destroyed Lee's life, and Julian Webb had been found dead. There is a killer out there, and I was definitely worried. I just knew something else was going to happen. I have no doubt that she will be looking to meet more victims, and that's what concerns me the greatest. In August of 1995, a man walks into the police station at Worthing and states that he is a victim of Dina as well, and his name is Rob Waite. Dina had mentioned his name several times, blaming him for all kinds of thefts and things, and I thought it was just another made-up name that she'd come up with. But this guy has arrived to tell me he has been coerced to go to America with Dina. And the date that he was there was exactly the same as when Lee met Dina at a hotel. He then followed her back to where she was with a guy. That was Rob Waite. Alarm bells go off straight away. Dina told him that she's dying from cancer and she wanted to go to America for the last 3 months of her life. So he had agreed to take all the money that he could, and they went to Florida. And I sat there open-mouthed. Dina's told Rob the same fabricated story that she'd told Julian. They had ended up doing moonlight flits from these hotels, motels, and taking anything that they could sort of grab before they left because people were after them. And then Rob told us that she administered something to him in the hotel. He felt a sharp pain in his upper thigh. He believed that she was administering insulin Dina then went back to England and had abandoned him in America. He had no money, no clothes. All he had with him really was his passport and few pennies. And now I'm thinking, could this be what happened to Julian Webb? Was he injected with insulin as well? We're truly shocked by what is going on, that this is her pattern of behaviour. And I realised that we had something much more serious going on here.
Now you've got 3 victims. Can you take action?
At that point, no, there was nothing else we could do to arrest Dina because we had no proof that she had injected Rob. I kept trying to push people to see if there was anything else because I think everybody had begun to think there may be other victims here. But then the case went quiet.
On the 1st of January 2000, there I am on the floor, feet tied, hands tied, and I'm thinking, this is uncomfortable. And she said, I'd just like to tie you up and we'll have some fun. And she put a towel over my face. She goes, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you. Bang! A bright flash goes off in your head. It's like someone firing a flash gun in your eyes. Bang! Again. So hard, impact split my head up both sides. I didn't even know I'd been stabbed. Honestly, I just couldn't take it in. What, your wife just tried to kill you? There was so much blood. It was all over the floor. To her horror, I sat up. I'm literally fighting for my life. I pinned her on the floor. She dropped the knife. And I said to her, what on earth are you doing? And she said, it's all been a lie. All been a lie. There was nothing else said. So, she calls her parents. After about 2.5 hours, her parents turned up. Her mother walks in. First thing she said, Dina, what have you done this time? Her father took me to hospital to get me stitched up. I was laying in a hospital bed. I could see 2 policemen attending another incident. I was trying to get their attention, but her father pulled the curtains. He wouldn't let me. When we got back to the house, Dina had packed some basic stuff. I just assumed she was going off with her parents. And I'm trying to work it all out. I could still hear the ringing of this baseball bat in my head. I really wanted to go to sleep. The pain was incredible. And then I noticed that all the blood had been cleared up. Her mother had cleaned it up. And then they left. They drove her back to Devon.
So I'm in the DS's office, tells me to take a seat, and we're going to talk about a job that's been pulled in the day before. Richard Thompson says he has been assaulted by his wife, and her name is Dina Thompson. I just went, fuck! Dina Thompson was also Dina Webb and Dina Wyatt. I thought, this can't be happening again. Immediately, police officers were sent to the address. But because Richard had waited so long to contact us, it had been 3 days since the alleged attack. We were playing catch-up. By the time we get to do the bathroom, Richard told us, Mum has already cleaned up all the blood that's in there. He would never clean a scene ever like that, ever, and somebody had.
This is a crime scene. The man nearly died. It stretches belief. We'd lost a lot of evidence. The golden hour, as we call it, had been and gone. The logical person would dial 999. Richard had wasted 3 days and allowed the scene to be destroyed. Unbelievable.
Not only have we lost all the evidence that could give us clear proof of what had happened, we had another problem. Richard doesn't want to press charges. I was shocked.
I was in a real dilemma because if he didn't want to prosecute, Dina could go off again and do this to someone else. This woman is out there and she could do it again. She's dangerous.
If you have been affected by any of the issues raised in this programme, help is available online at sky.com/viewer support.